Professor Murat Ali Dulupcu will be chaired these sessions. Dr. Jasmin Hasanovic, could you hear me?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay. I also made you as a co-host in the Zoom, so you can, if you want to share any slides or presentation, you can make it when you make your presentation. Dear Murat Hocam, now you can start your sessions. If you need anything, I will be here.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I
Hello.
hope we will have a good session. I think it's number 4 for paper presentation this afternoon. There are 4 papers in this session. As far as I understand, 2 of them are related to media studies, and the other 2 are related to team building and ethics, as we can say. So the first presentation will be by Jasmin Hasanovic. We used to say the floor is yours, but now we are going to say the screen is yours. So please, Jasmin.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Murat. Greetings to everybody on the conference. So we will present together with my colleague Emina Adilovic. We are going to present our paper, which is in fact more multidisciplinary than it is based particularly in communication theory or in political science or in political philosophy, information science, whatever, because we wanted to see the increasing reliance on technology during the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemics, and to analyze the relationship between the specific state of isolation we had and the possibility of using digital technologies as the then dominant free space for acting, as it was called. Starting with the assumption that virtual space is not given by itself, but rather a diabolical in the middle of reflecting the existing power relations and parallel inscribing of the potential for their resolution, we seek to examine the impossibility of anticipating wider social political alternatives with the emphasis of Bosnia and Herzegovina during the pandemics. In other words, acting on the web as we saw it, and it's nothing new in fact, is both immobilizing and emancipatory. And we want to show it with the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, based on the attempt to read chaos theory from the perspective of dialectical materialism. We try to reflect the application of theoretical assumptions about the influence of technology towards the affirmation of radical democratic practices. The interdependence of liberating and limiting, and on one hand, as emancipating and immobilizing on the other hand, in the context of information and communication technologies, will show that emancipation is not just a linear eschatological process. Instead, it depends on different unpredictable and non-linear outcomes, as well as the complexity of interpretation of global and localized phenomena. So Emina will now have her part explaining why the virtual has a double life, and afterwards I will jump in about the question of emancipation and immobilization, and then we will try to make up a conclusion based on the arguments we want to share with you today. So Emina, please.
Thank you, Jasmin. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you and to thank you all for this opportunity. To stick with our theme, I will talk about why we actually choose to think about virtual as double, as diabolical. So I will try to answer the question, why actually double life at all? Because virtual is diabolical in its nature. On the one hand, we link the beginnings of information and communication technologies to the techno-utopianism of the 1990s, where it was thought that a new virtual space would solve, if not all, then most of the existing social injustice by simply moving into a digital cosmos. However, around 10 years later, it began to be seen that the existing injustice and social ways of functioning not only spill over, but they create, actually we create additional phenomena that coexists in parallel with existing problems from reality. So talking about that, what are the challenges in the new technological space based on our real world, and how they are presented equally without completely rejecting the idea of techno-utopianism? It is possible to notice that those events, movements, and protests that were closely related to acting on social networks, they are actually, we can see them, they are here. And therefore, the determinant of network space as diabolical can be seen in more detail through the prism of activism on social networks as the most dominant way of using digital technologies. If we talk about the construction of virtual communities and communication channels among citizens, with the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemics and the quarantine of society present in many countries, not in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the increased use and stay on the internet is noticeable. And where in the Bosnian and Herzegovinian context, a large part of the time was spent on social networks as synthesizers, collectors actually, of new events, but they were also a place where we could see comments, mockery, ironical comments on political problems of the local context, as well as problematizing the quarantine state itself. So in this way, the old ideas of techno-utopianism have now emerged as ideas of new normality, as Slavoj Žižek has noticed that the hope, the physical distance will only intensify our connections with others, is actually trying to justify the inevitability of being on the same boat, as he said, on the same boat online. We didn't have actually other option. However, what is this online space? In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, acting in an online environment has emerged predominantly as a statements of different people rather than a productive communication and dialogue, which Siva Vaidyanathan explains when she says that social media does not encourage conversation, but provokes shallow reactions. Those shallow reactions are mostly appeared next to the comments on Twitter and Facebook as memes, new ways of expression that served us as a distraction, relief, and vaporization of anger, and the need for mobilization. So activities in the online environment in Bosnia and Herzegovina during the pandemics were predominantly activism, also citation, from actually activism from the armchair, or as we call it, or as Mary Cheiko in the book Super Connected calls that phenomena as hashtag activism.
So if we understand engagement as a symbiosis of attention on one side and activity on the other side, it is precisely that the attention is what the business model of a virtual, like Slavoj Žižek would say, or surveillance capitalism, how Shoshana Zuboff would call it, whose algorithms tend to keep our attention based on the information, subjectivizing us by our digital prints on the web, and creating the illusion that the whole world is on our newsfeed, and it is being composed of like-minded people, through the but without real communication among them, among those people who are in fact an anonym publicity. So without referring on examples such as Occupy Wall Street, Arab Spring, Podemos, or Syriza, it is clear that certain events in the time of anticipating our new normal managed to penetrate from digital to analog space and collide. For instance, we could see in the United States Black Lives Matter, or some anti-mask or anti-restriction protests which were held in Europe and in other parts of the world. But on the other hand, the illusion of hyperactivism on the net, the simulacrum of the digital memologization, as we call it, commentary and responses, together with dissemination of news and informations and disinformations through digital space, created a general responsive passivity in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So nothing, in fact, happened out of it. So our need for attention turns into a code that makes doing something, but in essence, we did nothing, in fact. However, it could be that it created and opened other questions. So although we have many memes referring to the collapse of the healthcare system, public procurement, or poor crisis management, that mobilized, in fact, people posting them, they, on the other hand, immobilized responsive political reactions to them, at the same time creating new spaces for struggle and making visible other issues that so far went under the radar. Here we come to the question of emancipation. If we understand it as a process of liberalization from domination and power relations, emancipation should not be viewed as a metaphysical or eschatological thing, but rather should be understood in plural, as Anastasia Klaus states, as emancipations, not as emancipation as one, pointing to their complexity as being a process, not a state. So emancipation is a process, not a state, not a final outcome, reminding us on nonlinear relations where the slightest change in the input can result in a large change in output, as something chaos theory reminds us on. Okay, how many time do we have? Maybe just to conclude. To conclude.
We have only time to conclude.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I will be very short and quick. We have already said that the double life implies both emancipation and mobilization, which in itself is not a new theoretical conclusion, but we tried to place it in the context of Bosnia and Herzegovina during the lockdown. So a new conclusion began to emerge in the relationship between local events and global technological realities. In other words, and in our case, we try to affirm the theory of chaos within social reality through the dialectic of material world, which showed that actually, and this is some kind of our conclusion, that mobilization arises in and from an emancipation. Their sequence is not linear, but causal consequential, because the virtual itself is only a part of the real social and material construction that arises with multiple collisions of different interactions. So, Jasmin, maybe do you want to conclude shortly?
Yeah. So what we saw, in fact, is that the anger on social networks was, in fact, the anger of the impossibility to act politically differently, the impossibility of participation within the political agora. So in other words, while contributing to the dangerous trap of seeing the engagement on the web as a political engagement, it is simultaneously creating individual experience collided with many other such experiences, creating fidelity depending on the situation as a dialectic between being and event, how Alain Badiou would call it, and anticipating subjects through which the event could be transformative. In other words, it allows the event to take place as a non-event, appearing in some other form, on some other place, by other occasion, or in other circumstances, as Gluck would stress out how chain of events can have a point of crisis that would magnify small changes. So I would stop here, and probably if there are any questions or something that is not being understood very well, to try to fix it afterwards during the discussion. So thank you once again.
Thank you also.
Thank you for brilliant presentation. The topic is very interesting, and it reminds me a movie. As far as I remember, the name was Surrogates by Bruce Willis. I don't know if you have ever watched that movie. It explains a double life by people and robots. Robots are on the place, on the daily life, but people prefer to stay at home. So they have a kind of a double life. And your presentation somehow reminds me that movie. And I
Please
think...
can you repeat the name of the movie?
Sorry?
Can you repeat the name? Surrogate. Okay.
Surrogates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce Willis. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? We are virtual, so there might be questions. Real questions or virtual questions.
But still, they stay questions.
Yeah. Greetings to all. If I may ask a question, please. Emir Vajzovic, co-chair of the Symposium. I would like to greet our bright colleagues from the university and just ask future questions for deliberation. Does this implies redefining the social contract? Do we need some kind of 2.0, 3.0 digital virtual social contract to redefine our relationships in a state?
Well, I will start, and I think that Jasmin will finish. Talking about that, I think that we are already now somehow. We don't need to think about 2.0. We are already in a state to think about 3.0, because that's somehow a future of thank you for these surrogates. A future of thinking about this problem.
In fact, there is no, of course, we in political theory and political philosophy knows that even the concept of social contract was something that is virtual as an idea. And if we understood and go back to Karl Marx, I really personally like to go back, when he said that we need to see technology only as a tool of emancipation. So not emancipation at a certain point per se. Then, yes, we can say that we always reinventing new social contracts due to the collision between the social realm, the technology, and our multiple interactions we have with the social realm. So yes, in fact, we are always redefining our social contracts, because we are not, we cannot be identified with the state of nature where we have very precise rules that cannot be changed. So social world is changing, and with the social world even the state of how we will organize ourselves is also being changed. So I hope you are satisfied with our answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, the time is up and we have to move to the next speaker. If there are any questions about this topic, this presentation, if we left time after the other presentations, we will be discussing if any time left. So the next speaker is Volkan Yüncü. He is going to speak on the topic of rethinking media legitimacy, building legitimacy and reputation on social media. So, Volkan, are you hearing me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good. So
Perfect.
the screen is yours.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I have to remind that the presentation will take about 15 minutes and 5 minutes for discussion and questions, okay?
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to try to share my screen with you. Here. Hopefully I have done it. So yes. So you can view my screen right now. Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Again, hello everyone, and thank you for the opportunity. Today I'm going to evaluate another dimension of social media, and the title is Rethinking Media Legitimacy. I'm going to discuss media and media legitimacy on like mostly organizational basis, like depending on the organization theory. So I believe it's going to be like interesting for similar domains. So basically, maybe I can. I am having some problems here. Just yes, I will use this way because otherwise I cannot weave. My screen is quite small. All right, so the title is Rethinking Media Legitimacy, and I said I'm going to discuss the issue on organizational basis. So basically, what is the purpose of this study? I believe, depending on the extensive literature review, that the organizational field is quite like full of topics in terms of social media and the effects of social media, not traditional media, on organizational activities, and like the risks of social media that are posed by social media mediums is quite understudied. So in this study, first of all, I want to draw scholarly attention to a field of research. I mean the social media and its effects on organizational activities. So in this I probe the extent of the challenge and complexity confronted by organizations in terms of establishing their legitimacy and reputation, and also maintaining these legitimacy and reputation in difference to threats that social media poses, or social media mediums pose to organizations, because the social media itself has a quite idiocentrical structural advantages, such as hyperconnectivity. So first of all, legitimacy and reputation are like sine qua non for survival of organizations today and success of organizations. They play, we know that they play a central role in growth and success and survival in especially complicated environments. So these constructs in these suggest the accrual and management of legitimacy, especially under conditions of complexity and uncertainty, which are also today driven mostly by social media platforms, and even some scholars name it like social media imposes a chaotic environment which cannot be controlled directly by organizations, or let's say literally organizations, just like individuals, are being lynched, whether they pay attention to the source of the information, whether it's true or not. And also gaining legitimacy and reputation is an increasingly complex process for organizations, And the reason of this is the organizations, they face multiplicity of expectations and norms due to the expansion of corporate activities, individual voice, stakeholder engagement, decentralization of communication, and the complex dynamics through social media. So here in the literature also, this is quite indicated by scholars, because scholars say that limited attention is being given on social media and its effects and on legitimacy and reputation. Although it's a top agenda for many business executives today, so they're trying to respond very quickly to the issues, and also the reputational risks. So which can, when you consider a single message or a single trend starting with a single message, can like take down a very established, very huge companies. And also the next step is opinion formation models. So traditional opinion formation models are being questioned today, and the social media and its effect on the opinion formation is another topic to be discussed, especially in organizational field. Also, clearly, we need a better understanding of how emergence of social media and of influence or legitimacy. So it's very open for future work, and the media itself, is a vehicle for advertising or mirrors of reflecting firms. I'm going to call it like mediated reality. I will mention. So basically, in the very start, this promising area of research includes the shift in the media, very limited research, how organizations can cope with the challenges and the complexity posed by social media, another area, risks, and also how organizations can cope with those effects, how they can develop strategies, or what types of strategies can be developed in order to prevent legitimacy and reputation crisis. So what is organizational legitimacy? Basically, we can adopt Scott Suchman's definitions, like a condition reflecting cultural alignment, normative support, or like a generalized perception or assumption. And in organizational literature, we have got dimensions, like basic dimensions and idiocentrical dimensions. Basic dimensions are those which I believe you're very familiar with, like you can view on the screen by Sign and et al., Eldridge and Scott and Suchman. But here, the thing I want to talk about is media legitimacy. So it is an idiosyncratic dimension, an emerging dimension, which is, though like it has a history, it's like a newly discussed issue. And media legitimacy is one of these idiocentric dimensions that we need to, as I suggest in this study, rethink. So here in, let's say, organizational field, scholars of organization theory have argued the construct in depth, the media construct itself, and disclosed the array of actors, agents, and mediators as potential source of legitimacy. And so sociopolitical authorities and regulators and media are very critical sources of legitimacy. So also we can say that, the potential sources of organizational legitimacy, like firstly news media, accreditation like bodies, surveys, and citizens in social media. So this part is quite new, and the point is very understudied. So we can, if we analyze the media legitimacy, we can base the framework of Deephouse and Suchman, like we can consider legitimacy aims, mediators, and guidelines. The question is, media is media a mediator, a guideline, or agent? Because the traditional approach is takes the media as a mediator, but today is like a agent and a guideline as well, because it's very strong through influencer at forming public opinion information. So as you know, in traditional, the media is compared to a giant hypodermic needle, which leads people to say, yes, if media says it's true, I can adopt it. So this giant hypodermic needle is often emphasized, but it is also changing. It's also transforming. because like as I said, the let's say the novel approach for legitimacy is in a position that like the media itself is an agent and a mediator. And so what is the media effect on our opinion formations, and why should we take into social media? Because we are walking around with media generated images of the world, but today, compared to traditional media giants, we have got social media, and social media is a really, really strong agent in terms of creating, mediating realities, especially like true influencers, because like opinion leaders, now they're losing like, let's say, kind of power, and the influencers are taking over that. So you know, the initial researchers in media, they mostly say that media reports reflect public opinions, but today we know that the media itself influences, and furthermore it guides, let's say, opinions. So media holds a very central place in society, and stakeholders are in that part. And but to let's say one more dimension, like setting the agenda. In terms of setting the agenda and public formation, media and the giant like traditional media actors, they're losing power. They're like, in my example, the Wall Street Journal, or let's say like CNN, BBC, or like similar Turkish channels, or any TV channels around the world. And so in terms of also agenda setting, social media is a much more like stronger actor today. So that's the main reason why we should rethink media legitimacy, because as I said, giant media empires, they're losing power, and their authority is being very questioned. And social media is a new artifact like of information technology, and compared to the traditional media actors, there is a like high level of hyperconnectivity. And but in this cyberspace, you know, this hyperconnectivity is a quite risk for organizations as well, because the product and service centered consumer community is forming en masse in cyberspace. So so these people are quite like they can raise their voice very easily, very fast, and because of social media, and posing risks to organizations. And these masses, they can discuss, evaluate, praise, or defame organizational activities, which is critical in terms of reputation and legitimacy. Because, as I said, without confirming the like the nature of the information, whether it's true or not, or where it comes from or not, the information is spread very fast. And so, by contrast with the traditional media tools, you know, minor groups, they have a chance to like raise their voices, and you know, the social media also lets ordinary citizens bypass the gatekeeping function and reach the organizational fields very easily. So I'm trying to do I have some time, by the way, to conclude?
3 minutes. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Because of a problem in my screen, I can't view the time. I'm terribly sorry about that. So here, as I said, in 3 minutes, social media, like feedbacks, they are like very strong in opinion formation, and you know, the risks like operational, reputational, legitimacy, cost, etc. There are lots of risks to be researched, because interestingly, you know, study shows that at least 20% of the information is about organizations in social media, especially in Twitter. And another interesting finding, we generally make use of negative opinions. We pay attention to them. And so here, to use my time more efficiently. So, okay, I need to conclude to use the time efficiently. So basically, this is a very promising area, social media research in organized field, it is quite understudied. You know, because the inclusion of voices through individual judgments in social media, constitute an indicator of organizational legitimacy. Based on heterogeneous social norms. Social media is a very critical source of information today. So they are strategic means. Organizations must use them like strategic tools to establish strong relationship with the masses, create communication, and to provide a favorable organizational legitimacy and research. And this social media mediums, they can let's say, they communities and organizations to be very swift to disseminate the information. So organizations need to learn how to respond quickly. And also, this is a quite strong tool to reduce information asymmetry. So thank you very much for your patience. And if you have questions, I would be happy to take them.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Volkan. Are there any questions? I have one, and I would like to ask a question. Legitimacy includes a kind of perception. In terms of demographic variables, that I mean for young generation and for older generation, legitimacy, I believe, that has different meaning. So if you consider younger population and older or elderly population, are there any significant differences in terms of media legitimacy?
Well, this is indeed a very important critical point that you're indicating to another research area. Indeed, I think it is very, very true because legitimacy of individuals and legitimacy of organizations, yes, they may have some similar features, but normally legitimacy is evaluated on social norms, social standards, social expectations. So this is an area because the perceptions of generations, X, Y, and Z generations, they differ terribly. So I mean, what is legitimate, what is quite legitimate for for parents may be a little bit, let's say, outdated and illegitimate for younger generations, and their use of social media and the way they make use of the social media is quite different from the elderly population. So I do agree the perception is important, but I think it should be studied or based on certain categories like X, Y, Z generations. And one more thing, in terms of perception, I think for younger generation, reputation is more important, compared to legitimacy, because reputation by its nature reflects a competitiveness. I mean, I'm better, you're better, this company is better, I mean, this brand is better, I'm going to buy, I'm going to wear this. So I think this is the case.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
So there is no other questions. If there is no, we will move to the next speaker. So thank you, Mr. Volkan, for brilliant presentation.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker, Çağlar Doğru, going to present the title, Building Effective Teams to Improve Performance, a Complex Systems Approach. So, Çağlar, can you hear me? Çağlar, Mr. Çağlar, okay, I can see you. If you unmute, we are going to hear you. Okay, great.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we are a little bit running out of time, so I will give you, I'm very sorry, but 12 minutes for presentation and 4 minutes for discussion.
Okay, thank you. I will try to use my time efficiently, and I aim to complete it in 10 minutes, I think. Okay, I'm now watching my time. First of all, thank you, Chair, and thank you, the dear participants. I have and research on team performance and improving this team performance. The underlining theme is complex adaptive systems. So first of all, I want to give some basic information and why I chose the complex adaptive systems to improve performance, and why I chose the team performance, not the organizational, the team performance. I want to declare that. The time for team research is more propitious than ever, and the science of teams is going through one of its most exciting moments, as we know. So, however, developments in this field have revealed several unresolved issues. One issue is the consideration of teams as complex adaptive systems. And in human resources management, the performance is also a very critical issue. So I am combining the complex adaptive systems, teams, and performance in one research. So it's very innovative in our field. So as we know, complex adaptive systems have been proposed as a core construct of nonlinear dynamical systems, and they involve a set of independent agents acting in parallel to develop models of how things function in their setting, and to refine such models through learning and adaptation. And accordingly, complex adaptive systems are open systems characterized by uncertainty about their evolution over time due to the interaction of their components. And the popularization of complex adaptive systems is due to the progressive evidence that many natural and social phenomena they exhibit chaotic behavior. So this is why I chose this symposium, a very appropriate symposium for my research, complex and chaotic chaos symposium. So following this approach, in my research, teams are characterized as complex. Why? Because they are entities embedded in organizations showing complex behavior. And the second one, why I chose it, they are adaptive. Why? Because they behave dynamically in dealing with environmental changes. And the third one, systems, due to their functioning being dependent both on the team's history and on its anticipated future. So, thinking of teams as complex adaptive systems is more than a metaphor to explain teams' functioning, and it's more than a set of nonlinear tools to analyze team behavior. So, in my research and also in the literature, there are three levels of causal dynamics. The first one, local dynamics. For example, the behavior, cognition, and effects of team members in interaction with their environment. The second one is global dynamics. This occurs the process, emergent structures, and rigidity or high fluidity. And in our research, I have defined some characteristics of these teams combining with performance. Not to mention all about them because of the time limit, but for example, I defined nonlinear relationships, as already we know. The variables of interest not always keep the proportionality. For example, small change on one variable can have a great impact on another one. And the other one I chose from my list that, for example, emergence of new properties. These are characteristics of teams, and at the same time, characteristics of complex behavior in organizations. For example, the other one, emergence of new properties. And I defined them as the systems shows a characteristic developed by interactions at a lower level. And so to be time efficient, I just asked some questions in the part of the study. What are the team contracts from a complex adaptive systems perspective. And my answer was considering teams as a complex adaptive system requires embracing the idea of fuzzy sets. And accordingly, the main construct involved here is the team concept itself. And another question, how and why are the constructs related? At this point, understanding teams as complex adaptive systems entails thinking in a nonlinear way to build theories and relate them to the constructs involved. Another one, when are the constructs applicable? In my opinion, this is the most neglected question in current team literature, despite the existence of very widely cited research about time and teams. There are studies, but all team processes and emergent states have a beginning, development, and ending, and team research should be able to trace these temporal dynamics. And I conducted my research in a qualitative technique. My qualitative research technique was concentrated on focus group discussion. I have invited 23 human resources managers, but only 9 participants attended my focus group discussion. And on Zoom application like this, I had some categorization on my research, and among them, some selected categories was adaptation, cohesion, coordination among team members, I mean, and decision-making, emergence, and
Thank you for your presentation. And we have a couple of minutes for discussion. Are there any questions from the participants? Nobody? Yes, there's no voice or hand as far as I can see. But I have a question as a chair.
of course,
As far as I understand, your focus group consists of private sector human resources managers. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Particularly in Turkish context, I know you haven't conducted a research on public sector, but what would you expect from public sector human resources managers? What would be the difference between private sector and public sector in terms of complexity approach?
Dear Chair, thanks for your question. It's very meaningful for the human resources literature, because there are some weaknesses in public sector for building teams, and I don't mention all of the institutions, but generally I speak. There is some weaknesses in forming this kind of teams, and evaluating team performance is also a very hard issue in public sector. But I believe, and I also suggest that we should more conduct researches on public sector. And also, it's one of the weakness of this research, that I cannot have the chance for comparing the results from the perspective of both private and both public. So thanks for your question. I will take it into consideration, and I will give my best to include some public sector agents into the research, but according to me, there is still some problems in public sector forming teams and evaluating their performance.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Mr. Çağlar Doğru. So, it's time to move to the next speaker, Barış Bayram. Barış, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, great. I can hear and see you as well. So the last speaker, Barış, is going to present a very long titled paper, but I will say only the last part of it, ethical possibility enhancement. So I think it's interesting to the health sector as far as I understand from the title. So the screen is yours, Barış.
Also public health, yes.
Thank you.
Greeting to everyone from Istanbul. Thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, I should say that I have to give my presentation by solely reading because my health condition is not well today. And I don't want to miss any significant point due to that and any spontaneity, if not a problem. Then I begin. The primary purpose of my research is to construct a universal sustainable civilization model that theoretically resolves the awareness willingness gap and critical uncertainties in relation to social justice and other ethical issues, which is able to systemically welcome the inevitable non-equilibrium states as a valuable process of exploration and exploitation in order to overcome any lack of development or injustices of the status quo. To do that by mainly appealing to philosophical argumentation methods that synthesize evidence-based studies essential to ethical complexities, my study aims to help such an overarching framework emerge. As major parts of the methodology for making it more accessible, I will communicate the usefulness of its theoretical components. First, how as complex adaptive system agents, humans, are critically affected and are determined by the factors beyond their control in terms of well-being capacities, signal processing, inaction and actions, hence performance, credit assignment, and rule discovery, thanks to academic research on social contagion, network dynamics, and positional inequality by Christakis and Fowler. Also, behavioral change model, wheel, by Michi, nudge theory by Taylor and Sunstein, two systems of thinking model by Kahneman, the conceptions of moral uncertainty by McCaskill, imminent human obsolescence by Danaher, distributed moral responsibility by Floridi, progress, human nature, and historical forces by Pinker, and hard enough determinism by Caruso. Hard enough determinism is a central constituent of my theory, and it means even if indeterminism too were valid for some situations in any realm, it wouldn't enable humans to have any level of free will, especially because there are always supra-individual factors enough to completely determine human behaviors. In other words, according to Caruso too, who we are and what we do are ultimately the result of factors beyond our control, whether those factors are determinism, indeterminism, or luck. And because of this, we are never fully or completely ethically responsible for our own actions in the basic desert sense. And also retributivism is not just and is also problematic and theoretically indefensible. Likewise, further economic, political, cognitive, social, and such like determinants of our behaviors and experiences are systematically interpreted in my paper. Then you can ask, is hard enough determinism compatible with ethical reasoning or ethical change and any desire or effort to build a better world? My answer is yes, because cultural forces and hence knowledge, but of course acquired, and scientifically true perspectives can cause behavioral change and are some of the main determinants of our decisions and actions. So better ethical theories have the potential for us to build a better world in some deterministic ways or hard enough deterministic ways. Based on thorough interpretations of these, for such determinants constantly affect each other as we know in complex systems. The interplay between such and such nonlinear causalities and consequently the interdependence of our lives are investigated in my article. Integrating multi-causal relations of these findings results in a rule-informing adequate understanding of how to develop models, systems, formulations, and even rights towards ethically desirable common futures, employing the relevant integrated probabilities imparted by the best available science, examining such recurring patterns as ethical causation in adaptive fashions. Second, by modifying the distributed moral responsibility and patient-oriented ethics for everyone to be able to exploit the claimed ultimate advantages in real or some of the time probably not perceived self-interest. Emerging from actualizations of such ethics, my research tries to demonstrate, in accordance with relational paradigm, I offer a paradigm shift to a patient-oriented ethics, which cares about any affected agent or system's well-being and autonomy, and thus designs passivity rules centrally, aiming to successfully prioritize that no human agent is disadvantaged, harmed, impaired, even if the harm is supposed to lead to much more good for the whole or other systems and agents. So I offer designs toward how to receive some desirable effects for every single human being, which also employs the probabilities in relation to such scientific expectations related to the passivity objectives, and so not mainly the consequences. In addition to that, to effectively deal with unintended, unexpected, unknown consequences and effects and externalities as a necessary complement to such an unintentionality and intentionality in ethics. My patient-oriented ethics model structurally includes the states and effects of non-human systems in a holistic way. Moreover, I examine both multi-layered social networks and minor everyday interactions in an approximation of chaotic behavior, symbolically articulating a minor unfair discrimination against any ordinary person can activate a causal chain of global catastrophic events or initiate some high impact social evil. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. As a result, I address minor unethicalities and ethicalities, especially in the context of self-organized criticality and phase transitions in the sense of ethics and politics. Similarly, the interplay between micro-macro level functions is modeled as ethical political multiplexities, focusing on diverse deliberations. This framework utilizes divergent and convergent social justice issues. Therefore, I must problematize unethical self-reinforcing power relations, structures, interactions, or asymmetries, and hence social dominance orientation, tribalism, authoritarianism, and misleading, harmful norms, traditions, discourses, etc., and related cognitive biases as elements of any root causes or systemic drivers. Furthermore, my work has an advocacy aspect by means of widespread communication, negotiations of the EP mindset or tools. More ethical collective behaviors, cultural systems, and cooperation narratives can emerge within self-organizing courses of action. So the EP theory is not like a totalitarian ideology, claiming to be able to explain and solve any problem or issue. Instead, it's an open theory, always requiring criticisms and modifications that integrate new, more complex and useful theoretical findings from any discipline in relation to ethical causalities. In addition, different ethical approaches to gradual, incremental, or revolutionary transformational non-systemic or systemic change can benefit from these terms and conceptions, which are the principal conceptual mechanisms of this framework. In 2016, in my academic paper, I coined the term ethical possibility enhancement, meaning to probabilistically facilitate one's own and others' motivations, opportunities, and capabilities to understand, construct, develop, actualize, realize, or facilitate what is more ethical, quantitatively, any increase in probabilities of ethical possibilities, and qualitatively, any improvement in the ethicality of current future possibilities, and counter any problematic entropy. As integral part of EPE, cognitive ethical development is one's own current capacities to deploy, enhance one's own and others' ethical reasoning capabilities, having 4 determinants: cognitive capabilities, rationality capabilities, ethical deliberation capabilities, and integrated developments. Cognitive ethical development is conceptually saying an open system, which is different within every human, and perpetually having volatilities in forms of upgrade, vulnerability, and dimensioned entropy, which could be seen as any dysfunction, disorder, maladaptation, developmental loss, removal, temporary unavailability, inaccessibility, damage, or problematic change too, that works against any ethical possibility enhancement, results in ethical impossibility entropy, which belongs to my, again, original terminology, and it doesn't imply irreversibility. Finally, in the article, it's shown that not only human rights, but also the United Nations global goals could be effectively promoted and drastically improved by the EP framework. And otherwise, it seems that the UN will probably continue failing the SDGs. So the EP is both a theory of change and a theory for change. Plus, it can innovate perspectives to realize the rights of nature and even animal rights by providing a broader interdependence thinking. To conclude, put it all together, the EP ethics, which is patient-oriented and effects and probabilities-based ethics, is defended against virtue ethics, which is agent-oriented and habits character-based, also against the ontological Kantian ethics, which is action-oriented and duty intention-based, and finally against consequentialist ethics, which is outcome-oriented and results utility-based. As I frame ethics based on probability, nonlinear causality, determinants of inaction and actions, factors for non-existence, and existence of useful rules, capabilities, responding to the complexity of real-world phenomena. In other words, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, is invalid and misleading in the realm of ethical complexities. There are different and mostly unjustly unequal determinants, factors for each individual and or in different situations. Dimensions and types of disadvantages in capabilities, vulnerabilities, and powerlessness must be considered in favor of relevant agents. Also, scarcity mindset of the economically disadvantaged humans and reputational availability cascades too must be seen as critical factors for such unethicalities. In accordance with such hard enough determinism issues, ethical responsibility too must be distributed based on the considerations of complex and thus global and local, minor and major determinants and causalities, so unequally in favor of relatively more disadvantaged and powerless humans and some other agents as scientific findings require. Otherwise, ethical rules are mostly dysfunctional and a sort of wishful thinking or irrational and many times even harmful optimism. Likewise, advocacy efforts too must consider the causalities of ethicalities instead of demanding the same ethics from all humans, as if ceteris paribus were valid in the real world, meaning ignoring especially the capability gap, motivation gap, and opportunity gap among individuals. So the conceptions, usages of consequence, duty, general action rule, intention, virtue, vice, moral character, utility, outcome, and actions are generally, to my research, misleading, problematic, or mostly unethical and do not work. For this reason, the EP ethics exclude such approach. On the contrary, the much needed analysis and designs of patience rules and probabilities of effects are the best ways to ensure any desired ethicality and hence to improve individual well-being and individual autonomy, as autonomy is a prerequisite for the optimization of short-term and long-term well-being. The EP argumentation also resolves the false dichotomy between altruism and self-interest in this way. It uses any person's choice to continue living more as its meta-ethical ground. Its designs use probabilistic approaches to be able to consider multiple causes and diverse effects instead of solely at general consequences. In a nutshell, these are the main conceptualizations of my complexity theory of ethics. But if there is more time in relation to the EP theory, I can summarize the mentioned researchers' academic work from which my theory emerged.
Thank you, Mr. Barış Bayram.
Thank you very much.
For the great presentation. And
thank you very much.
For myself, I'm looking forward to see the hard copy of your paper. How can we reach your paper? Is it published or going to be published?
Still not published. I can complete it in 2 months.
Okay. Looking forward to see it then.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Are there any questions? No questions? Mr. Barış, there is no question, so we are lucky because we are not on schedule and we have used some more 10 minutes than the schedule.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for great presentation.
Thank you.
Dear participants, we are now at the end of session 4, and the symposium will continue with the forthcoming presentations and talks. I hope you all the best for all the participants and listeners. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.